The first thing is I wanted to wish Stephen her long life for his mom's Yotzat. Her Hebrew name is Esther Bas Moshe. And Kevin, you've got a dedication.
2 dedications for first Shlomo, first Shlomo for all Klal Israel, and for success of the soldiers, that they return, defeat the enemy, return safely, and the hostages get returned unconditionally. And the 2 names for Revuah Shlomo are Aryeh Leib ben Leah and Yehoshua ben Shulamit.
Okay, and I've got 2 names, Leah Masha Bas Sarah and Yaakov ben Basa. Okay. So teach us, Kev, before I go through.
Okay, just from this book here, it says here, peace offering. And the word for peace is shalom. And we greet someone with the word shalom. And it says in Pirkei Avot, chapter 4, do you know the verse, Damon? Verse 20.
Okay.
Be first to greet every person. And so it sets the tone for like just a nice vibe. You say shalom. It's like at the end of the day, one must try to be nice to people, greet people with a pleasant countenance, and not be ratty or irritable with people, especially if they've done nothing wrong to you. Because some people just snap at others for no reason because they're having a bad day at the office. And it's not, sometimes it's not. It's happened to me on many occasions, and it's not nice when people do that to you. They've got the problem, not you. And so it says also in Tehillim, chapter 122, for the sake of my brothers and friends, I shall speak of peace. And it says here, last thing, I don't want to be too long. People talk about that, use the word. When Nichum Avelim going to a house, a Shiva house, and also it says here, when we speak, we need to avoid the negative and stick to the positive. We need to avoid Lashon Hara, complaining, and rudeness. In Tehillim it says, who desires life and good days? Guard your tongue from bad and your lips from speaking evil. That's from Tehillim chapter 34, verse 13. And lastly, we aren't perfect. At times we slip up and say the wrong things, but for our opening words, for the first impression, we should endeavor to always greet others in a pleasant, peaceful manner. One insensitive remark at the beginning can ruin a potentially important long-term friendship or relationship.
So that is true. Just one thing, incidentally, is that secular people often turn around and say, "Oh yeah, but it's true." In other words, you say to somebody, "Don't say Lashon Hara." They say, "Yeah, but it's true." So it's not obviously it's not a lie, but it's not helpful. It's not building. It's not helpful. It's not anything other than destructive. The only time you can speak Lashon Hara is if you're warning somebody, like if you're going on if somebody is going dating on a shidduch, and the woman is one fork short of a cutlery set in terms of sanity, you've got to say to the guy, "Listen, I'm going to give you one instruction: run." It's okay, but generally, don't say more than you need to say. Just yeah.
Saying this, talking about Lashon Hara is talking negatively, and I've actually told people, what are you achieving? Why do you have to discuss it? Do you feel better? You feel fantastic that you're putting someone down? What's the end game here? And they can never answer you because they know they're wrong.
So I'm going to stop, but before we start, I'm pausing the show. Okay, so what we're going to do is, Gavin, I want you to read the new Mishnah, where we're up to, and you'll be quite happy that we're almost at the finish line.
If it's a new Mishnah, must I say Shechianu or not?
No, it's not a new Gemara. Just...
Okay, no, I'm just messing with you guys. All right, the Mishnah lists items that may not be purchased for fear they were stolen from their owners. One may not purchase wool, milk, or kids from hired shepherds, nor wood or fruits from watchmen of fruit orchards. But one may purchase woolen garments from married women in Judea, and linen garments in the Galilee, and calves in the Sharon. But if any of these women told the purchaser to conceal his purchase, it is prohibited to purchase from her. And one may purchase eggs and chickens anywhere.
Okay. So, by the way, when I first read this Mishnah, I was a bit out of it. So I read, one might not purchase wool, milk, or kids from hired shepherds. I thought, oh, they're selling children now. It's kids is obviously the goats. Okay, so don't be silly like I was. So just as a matter of interest, the Mishnah refers to shepherds who are hired to care for other people's flocks. So the reason why we do not buy these items from hired shepherds is because we suspect that they stole them from the flocks of their employers, because most of the shepherds were dirt poor. And therefore, if they're selling an item, you can be pretty sure they stole it, because shepherds were not only poor, but they were notorious for being unprincipled in regard to theft. And how do we know that? It's a Mishnah in Kedushin 82a and in Sanhedrin 25b. Okay? So as far as the watchmen are concerned, of fruit orchards or wood, you get the wood from fruit trees, obviously. Now, do know that why don't we suspect so it says we can purchase you can purchase woolen garments from married women in Judea. I want you to note something. It says married women in Judea, and linen garments in the Galilee, and calves in the Sharon. So the reason being is obvious, is that we don't suspect that the women are selling these items without their husband's permission, which would constitute theft. For the items are the woman's own possessions, but according to the way they got contractually married, when they sell them with their husband's consent, it's in community of property. They would need both parties' consent in order to sell the item, and therefore it would be unlikely that that they would be selling it without that consent, because it's very conspicuous. You can't hide the item. So in Judea, women commonly worked with wool, and in the Galilee with linen. Now the Sharon is the coastal region of Israel between Jaffa and Mount Carmel, and calves, which are baby cows, were very inexpensive. It's not like today, why is calf meat so expensive today? Because you're killing an animal before it reached full maturity, and therefore there isn't much meat, and you're paying a lot for it. I'd say an arm and a leg, but not like a calf. Calves were very inexpensive in that area, and women living there would buy their own calves and raise them and sell them, obviously with the husband's consent. So it's pretty straightforward. Now, if any of the women were told the purchaser to conceal his purchase, obviously, if you're told to conceal a purchase, it means that it's prohibited to purchase from her, because it's apparent that they stole the items and are afraid of being caught. So the Meiri understands the Mishnah to mean that the sellers told the buyers that they wish to hide themselves while making the sale, meaning if they did it in any form of seclusion, whether it's hiding the purchase, doing it at the back of a secluded area, etc., there's something gone amiss. So why can you purchase eggs and chickens anywhere? Because those items are very cheap, and we don't suspect that the seller would risk being caught stealing them for the nominal return for a couple of shekels their sale would bring in. However, if there was this act of concealment or request for concealment, we would be suspicious then nonetheless. Okay, so let me just stop the screen share. So the rabbis taught in the Brisa, one may not buy from shepherds the mature goats or baby goats, which are referred to as kids, nor fleeces, nor wool that was torn from the sheep. So why torn from the sheep? Is because if it's sheared from the sheep, you would see that the animal had a huge amount of wool and now it's virtually naked, so that theft would be easily detected. But if little areas were shorn off or pulled off, or tufts of wool were pulled off from the sheep over a period of time, and you don't have one solid area of wool, you can suspect that it was done surreptitiously in incremental stealings over a period of time in order for the owner not to notice. But you can buy from them sewn garments, for the garments belong to them. So what does the Gemara mean? Is that, okay, so maybe this person collected tufts of wool from the sheep over a period of time and they're technically stolen. So why would you be able to buy a garment? Because if you remember, there's this concept that if even the shepherds pull for the wood from the employers, bit by bit, they acquired it via a shinoi maaseh, which is a physical change, and they affected it through processing it in the garment. So remember, we learned in the 93rd daf of Bava Kamma in Bet that one yush mixed by the owner, or a physical change in the actual object where you have to return what you stole. In other words, exactly what you stole. The minute you process it, it now has changed its physical properties and it's acquired by the thief, at which case you may buy it if you're suspicious. But the thief, if he's caught, obviously would have to he would be responsible for that theft. But because of the physical property changed, you don't have to be as cautious because he has technically acquired it. Okay, so you can buy milk and cheese in the wilderness, but not in a settled area. What does that mean in the Gemara? It means if the place where the shepherds offer those items for sale in the wilderness, you can purchase them because it's very uncommon for the owners of the flock which produce these dairy products to travel out on a daily basis to this remote region to collect them from the shepherds. So the owners therefore relinquish control to the shepherds because there's only a certain amount in their jurisdiction they can control, and therefore that's not a problem. But if the shepherds sell them in any sort of close proximity to the settled areas where the owners have control, the standard practice is for the shepherds to deliver their items to the owner because they're in close proximity, and they're not allowed to be purchased because we can presume then that they're stolen. Okay. Now, you can buy from them, the Gemara says, 5 or 4 sheep at once, or 5 or 4 fleeces at once, meaning the garments themselves. But you can't buy only 2 sheep at once or 2 fleeces. So why? Because you can presume that the shepherd isn't going to risk stealing 4 or 5 animals or fleeces at one time, because the owner would surely notice the absence of such a large amount of sheep or wool. And the shepherd would be unable to explain away the shortfall by saying, for example, that a wolf raided the flock. The wolf's not going to bring down, even a few wolves are not going to bring down 4 or 5 sheep. But you can say that 2 sheep might have been attacked in the raid. So the absence of just 2 sheep or fleeces would probably go unnoticed if the owner had a large amount of stock. And even if he did notice it, the shepherd could successfully attribute the deficiency to a predator. So that's not your problem. So as long as it's a substantial amount of animals, 4 or 5 or 4 or 5 garments, not garments, raw fleeces, to where it will be noticed, the theft, then you don't have to worry that it was stolen. Okay? So Rav Yehuda says that when you're dealing with domestic sheep, you can buy from them, but range sheep, one may not buy from them. So let me just give you an example. So we're presuming that shepherd would not risk stealing domestic sheep because the owner knows the count of his flock. And he's going to notice that some are missing, according to Rashi. But if the sheep glozed in a remote location far from the owner, they're known as range sheep. In other words, they're off the visual range or off the driving range of where the owner would have close proximity. And therefore, the shepherd is not afraid that his theft will be detected. So that's certainly not your problem. Okay. So the Gemara basically sums up and it says, listen, this is the general rule for the matter. Anything that is sold by the shepherd, the owner will sense to be missing. In that case, you can buy from them. But something that the owner is not going to have a sense that a stock will be missing, you cannot buy from them. So if this particular owner had hundreds of sheep, you should be reticent to buy even 4 or 5 sheep from this person, because there will be no theft that is going to be noticeable. If there is even a lower quantity, but not lower than 4 or 5, but the owner has a small amount of sheep in his pen, the shepherd is not going to chance losing his job. So it's a principle. These mechanisms are only illustrating the principles. So the Gemara analyzes the brisa, and when it ever refers to a master, it refers to one of the Tanaim. Master said one may buy from them 4 or 5 sheep at once, or 4 or 5 fleeces at once. Now, if it can be said that one may buy 4 goats or fleeces from them, why do you have to state 5? So what the Gemara is saying is, listen, if the minimum requirement is 4, state 4, that it's not going to be noticed. Anything under 4 won't be noticed as a theft. 4 or more will be noticed as a theft. Therefore, the shepherd won't take the chance, and therefore can be safe to purchase. Why mention 4 or 5? Because at the end of the day, is it 4? Is it 5? Why be vague? So
maybe it's dependent on the size of the animal, because that sheep can be different sizes. So you might need to say 4 or 5, because depending on the sizes.
So you're onto something there. So so that's exactly it, but slightly different in terms of scenario. It's not the amount of sheep, but Gavin's onto something. According to Rav Chisda, said, look, the brisa means 4 out of 5, meaning that if the entire flock consisted of 5 sheep, you can buy 4 of them at once, because the shepherd wouldn't be that brazen as to steal 4/5 of the stock. So the overlying principle is here is not the size of the sheep necessarily, but will it be noticed or detected if any are missing from a theft point of view? If it will, based on the amount of was based on the size of the flock, then that's the determining factor. So Gavin, you were definitely on the right track. So the Gemara analyzes the brisa, and it says, listen, it's a little difficult to understand, because you say in the first part of the brisa, one may buy from them 4 or 5 sheep or 4 or 5 fleeces, and that implies, yes, 4 or 5, yes, we can buy, but 3 not. But then if you read the latter part of the brisa, it says, but not 2 sheep. But this implies, but 3 we may buy. So if you remember the brisa, it says you can buy 4 or 5, but not 2. So again, it leaves the question of, well, what about 3? Is 3 going to be detected, etc.? And the Gemara says, listen, there isn't a question here, because the latter part of the brisa, which permits buying even 3, refers to healthy sheep, whereas the first part of the brisa, which permits buying only 4 or 5, refers to frail ones. So the bottom line of it is, the owner would value his healthy sheep and keep a watchful eye over them. So if 3 are missing and they prize sheep, or let's say what Gavin said, that they're super big and valuable, the owner's going to notice if 3 are missing, so you can buy less of a quantity of prize sheep or bigger ones, or healthier ones. But frail sheep are not as highly valued by the owner, and they're not as vigilantly watched and constantly checked up on. But Gavin, you were right on the money there. The Gemara continues to analyze the price, and it says, Rav Yehuda says, domestic sheep, you can buy from them, but range sheep, one may not buy from them. So the Gemara says, listen, what's the meaning? They inquired, is Rav Yehuda addressing the Brice's first ruling and being stringent? Or perhaps he's addressing the Brice's latter ruling and being lenient? So the Gemara says, okay, explain. So if he's addressing the first ruling and being stringent, for the Bava Kamma said, which is the general rabbinic opinion in the first ruling, one may buy from them 4 or 5 sheep, and to this Rav Yehuda countered, this pertains only to domestic sheep, but with respect to range sheep, even 4 or 5 you may not buy. In other words, he's being stringent. He's saying, listen, if sheep are close by, you would be able to buy 4 or 5 because the owner would notice it disappearing, but sheep at a different province or different range out of the purview of the owner, in that particular case, you can't even buy one because the shepherd's going to take a chance. So is that being stringent? If you interpret it that way, it is. Or perhaps, so that's what they asked Rav Yehuda. And to this, Rav Yehuda countered, he said, look, as far as that's concerned, with respect to range sheep, even 4 or 5 one may not buy, or perhaps that's if he's being stringent. Maybe the Rabbonim want to know, the Bava Kamma, is he addressing the latter ruling and being lenient? What do we mean being lenient? Is that in one, you can't buy 2 sheep nor 2 fleeces, and Rav Yehuda counted, okay, that pertains only to range sheep. But as long as it's within the physical range of the owner, in terms of domestic sheep, you can buy even 2. So it's saying, is it being stringent, which means far away you can't buy any, but close you can buy 4 or 5? Or is it being lenient and saying that basically you can buy 4 or 5 of sheep on the range, but as far as closer sheep, you can buy even 1 or 2, meaning because they're being well watched? Is it a stringency or a leniency? So the Gemara says, listen, come learn the resolution which is taught in a brisa. Rav Yehuda says one may buy domestic sheep from them, but one may not buy from them range sheep. In all places, one may buy from them 4 or 5 sheep. Do you want me to repeat the last statement, guys?
So just go. Why is there a restriction on free range sheep? I didn't get that. So I wasn't. Yeah, I was listening. Or
That's no
why
problem.
can't you? Can you just say it again, please?
Yeah. So basically, say you had a farm within a kilometer of you, then as the owner would check that the shepherds were doing adequate stock take. You'd be more hands-on. If you had a farm 100 k's away from you and you had a shepherd there, you could pretty much guarantee that he'll try and steal some of it because it's not as easy to monitor. And therefore it's referring to domestic sheep within a certain radius of the owner, whereas range sheep is a further range away from the owner in terms of radius. So anything in a further range, the price is going to be more stringent, that you can't even maybe buy 1 or 2 because you can guarantee they're going to be stolen.
Okay.
So what we're saying is Rav Yehuda being stringent that says, listen, close by, you cannot buy less than 4 sheep because it will be noticed if they're stolen, and far away you can forget about buying any sheep from the shepherd. Or is he being lenient and saying that basically, with regards to domestic sheep, you can buy even 1 or 2, but far away you can buy 4 or 5 because even that would be detected. So the Gemara says, listen, this is the resolution. Is it a leniency or is he going to hold as a stringency? So Rav Yehuda cleared it up and said, one may buy domestic sheep, in other words, sheep close to the owner, but one may not buy from them range sheep. In all places, one may buy from them 4 or 5 sheep. Okay? So in other words, you can buy 1 or 2 on domestic basis, but as far as a further range, you can buy from them 4 or 5 because that will be noticed as missing from stock, even if it's further away. Okay? So since Rav Yehuda said we may buy 4 or 5 sheep from them in all places, what does that actually mean? Even in the wilderness, even in a further away place. Learn from this that when he differentiates between domestic sheep or sheep within a further range from the owner, he's addressing the latter ruling, which prohibits buying only 2 sheep, and he's being lenient. So what does that mean? He's saying that with respect to domestic sheep, you can buy even 2 sheep. But if it's a further range, you have to buy a minimum of 4. in order that it would be noticed with stock take losses. So the Gemara says, indeed, learn from this. Okay. So let me just go through the other parts of the Gemara. Remember, guys, the more we go through now, the less we'll have to do on the next session. So the Gemara discusses...
Damon, hold on. One last thing. Quickly, okay?
Sure.
It said learn from this. Is it giving us tips on stealing or trying to let thou shalt not steal? Because I'm getting very confused here.
So it's funny that you bring that
How to
up.
steal and
is
get away
that-
with it?
No, it's funny you should bring this up because the issue was addressed to Rabbi Cohen as well as Rav Simcha Steiner in different legal cases because we both asked. I remember Gavin asked this with Ian Shapiro. Gavin said this is giving us a how-to guide of how to get out of murder, Sanhedrin. Remember, Gav?
Yeah, it's something. What's it? The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Perplexed, whatever it was called. Was it Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? It's the same type of thing. We were trying to create our own book. I agree with you, and I'm very upset we never finished that book because I think that book would have taken off. It would have done so well.
Well, Ian was such a good lawyer; he would have gotten you off. So
100%. I couldn't do that alone because
thank you now.
I'm a layman.
I gotta thank you.
I need a lawyer to help me with that. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Gavin, I gotta thank you now. Now all I'm hearing in my head is thank you for all the fish. Thank you for
he doesn't know where that's
Yeah.
from. That's from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
No, I do
And,
know. I've read it.
The Rambam wrote a book, Guide for the Perplexed.
Yeah, I know, but I knew the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I thought the Perplexed was part of it, but it's not. It's separate. That's the Ramban.
Gavin,
Listen,
are perplexed.
It doesn't take much to perplex me. I can perplex myself. That's how good I am.
Me too. I can do the same
Yeah.
thing for myself. So, just a few more minutes. The Gemara discusses buying fruits from guards of orchards. There are apple orchards, orange groves, etc. So the rabbis taught in the Brisa we can buy from watchmen of fruit orchards when they are sitting and selling out in the open, and the fruit baskets and scales are before them. Okay? But if any of them told the purchaser, hide your purchase, it's prohibited to buy from them. We may buy from them at the entrance of the garden, but not at the back of the garden where it's secluded. So the Gemara discusses buying things from a known robber. So if you know somebody to be a robber, it was stated with respect to a robber, when is it permitted to buy from him? And according to Rav said, as long as the majority of the possessions are his, which means he's ruling leniently, that the purchaser may presume that the particular item he's buying is from the majority and not from the minority of stolen property. Shmuel has got a different opinion to Rav, and he said even if the minority of the possessions are his, Rav Yehuda ruled for Rav Ada, the attendant of the rabbis, in accordance with one who says that it's permitted to buy from a robber even when the minority of the possessions are his. So what does that actually mean? It means that as long as there's a possibility that what you are purchasing is not stolen property, it's permitted. So who is more stringent, Rav or Shmuel? Rav is more stringent. So Rav is saying if the majority of the items are not stolen, you may buy from somebody you know to be a robber, because it's very likely that if 10% is stolen and 90% is not, then therefore you've got a high probability of buying non-stolen produce. And Shmuel is ruling very leniently, and he's saying, listen, let's not say maybe 10 and 90, maybe 20% of the items are legitimate and 80% are stolen. He said there's a 20% shot you're buying something that's not stolen, and therefore there's a probability that it's not stolen, therefore you can buy it. So I think we'll end off on that note.